This simple change in my workflow has massively increased case acceptance with my patients in my dental practice. This workflow has changed over time, which means it didn't happen overnight. After continuously evaluating how I was presenting treatment to my patients, and then analyzing why some patients were moving forward and some didn't. And hopefully, after watching this video and implementing at least some of the things I discussed, more of your patients will move forward with treatment, which should ultimately add to the bottom line of your practice. If you're new to this channel, my name is Nilesh Shah, and this is where I share what I'm doing in my dental practice, what's working, what's not working, my wins and losses. And if you'd like to stay updated on this type of content, join our newsletter over at dentalstartupacademy.com. I will share the link below this video for those of you who believe in taking action. Here's exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to go over my old workflow, the problems, what I did for so many years and why it didn't work, and which ultimately led me to create a new workflow. And then we're going to get into the new workflow or my new implementation for the ultimate goal of massively increasing case acceptance with patients. And then, of course, putting the plan in action. We're going to go over some of the tools and the software that I use on a daily basis in my practice when I'm presenting treatment to patients. Since we're talking about presenting treatment to patients to increase case acceptance, I'd strongly recommend that you watch this video that I have done in the past on how to present dental treatment plans. I'll post the link for that video in the description below. All right, let's get right into it. We all love buying gadgets for our practices, but they can get expensive. You know, you bought things over the years simply for them to collect dust in your practice. Maybe you bought them initially because you saw other doctors using them. Maybe they recommend those products. You know you need to use it, and by doing so, it's gonna help your patients understand what it is you're recommending to them and ultimately get them to move forward with treatment. But you buy the equipment and you realize you don't know how to fully use it. Or there's accessories that go along with it, so you need to buy that too, so you spend even more money. But you realize that our fast-paced PPO insurance-based practices, we can't fully utilize these products on an everyday basis on every single patient. If you're a cosmetic practice that is out of network, or you happen to be a fee-for-service practice, you can afford to extend your appointment time enough where you can take full series of photos on every single patient. But for a typical PPO practice with doctor columns as well as hygiene columns, our time is limited. I remember when I opened my practice, I bought this SLR camera, the Nikon D3200. I also bought a ring flash as well as a macro lens to go along with it. And I remember taking this CE course on photography where it's the whole deal where you have this assistant helping you taking full arch photos on every single patient. Taking photos wasn't the problem. It's the process of what happens after you take the photos was causing issues. For instance, you take the SD card from the SLR, you plug it into a wired connection into a PC to transfer the photos to the PC. And then you would have to transfer it into a practice management system. In my case, it's Open Dental. Then you attach it to a patient's chart. And this whole process was even much slower when I delegated it to my assistant. So to fix this process at that point in time, I purchased these Wi-Fi SD cards. It was supposed to work seamlessly where if you're taking the photos on your SLR, the photos would automatically transfer to the PC without any wired connection. There was even this dedicated Windows application which you could configure and tell it whenever you take photos on your SLR, where the photos are to be saved. You could even put it on a network folder. But the application crashed many times and the photos would not transfer on time. And there was this another issue where if your SLR is not in use, it would shut off the power to the SD slot. And the Wi-Fi SD cards need power to run it. And that's why it didn't transfer photos on time. So ultimately, I would just take the SD card, again, put it into a wired connection to transfer the photos to the PC anyways. So it was defeating the purpose of having those Wi-Fi SD cards. And the whole process was frustrating, so I completely let go of that workflow. So I got bored of doing this process over and over again on every patient. So ultimately, I stopped using the SLR and then it was just collecting dust in my office. Then I bought these magic wand cameras called the Dare You, and they were decent quality for the price. However, I bought a couple of those and one of them malfunctioned over time. Another one had a cable issue with the USB, so then we were using it on a different computer, and ultimately, I got rid of these cameras as well. So for a while, we were not taking any photos on any patients because I hated the whole process. Fast forward a couple of years and I invested into 3D printing. And at the same time, I thought to start taking photos again to close more cases. But I remember what happened last time. But this time, I decided to take a step back and think about creating a better workflow. I needed a way to engage the patients more when I was presenting treatment to them, so they understand what's going on. But how do I do that with the least amount of friction? From my previous experience, from the point of taking the photos to the point of getting the photos in front of the patient, it just took too long, too many steps in between. So to reduce the friction, whether it's my own mindset or just the process of getting the photos in front of the patient, I started with the belief that this was going to work and there's a better way. So one was, we didn't need to take full arch photos on every single patient. We would just take the photos of teeth that needed work, like for example in a quadrant or an area, and the goal is to get it in front of the patient in less than 2 minutes. And more importantly, being able to draw or mark up the photos right in front of the patient while I'm sitting right next to them. And also, there's no need to import the images into the practice management software to attach it to the patient's chart, unless my team needed it to submit to insurance. And don't forget, when you take these photos on an SLR, these are high resolution, high quality photos that take up a lot of room. So if you're backing up patient data on your PMS, which you should be, it's basically using up hard drive space. Not that hard drive space is expensive these days, it's relatively inexpensive. However, why waste the time and resources for this step when it's completely unnecessary? And that's why we eliminated this step. And what we wanted was to export these images to the cloud where they can be accessed by anybody in the office. So to start taking photos again, I decided to take photos every day on all patients when possible. And if I'm doing it every day, I become better at it over time, which will increase my speed. And as I mentioned earlier, I needed a way to mark up the patient photographs or draw on the images while the patient is sitting right next to me. And for this specific reason, I bought this specific laptop called the Lenovo Yoga laptop, and this has changed the game for me. I wish I did this years ago. I love using it because of the screen. It's very simple to draw on the screen with their built-in stylus. The stylus is nothing fancy, but it accomplishes everything that I need to do. So here's my exact workflow now. One, you take the photos with the SLR of the specific areas in the mouth that need work, maybe one quadrant or multiple quadrants, or maybe 1 or 2 teeth. It does not have to be full arch photos. So since I only have one assistant, I do the photos myself while she's busy doing something else. And this process usually takes about 20 seconds tops. Second, grab the SD card, plug it into the laptop via high-speed SD reader. Now, if you don't have a high-speed SD reader, it's a must for a fast transfer of images. Then you want to select the images and just copy paste the images you want into Microsoft OneNote. So this may be about 20 seconds or so. And third, go over with the patient, meaning unplug the SD reader from the laptop, fold the laptop over, bring up your chair right next to the patient, bring the laptop as close as possible to the patient. Now you can zoom in on the images, draw on it, mark it up, go over the risks, go over the problems with specific teeth, point out the issues. And last, once the patient leaves the office, I just go back to OneNote and click on the tab where I imported the photos from the SLR and just literally right-click export and save the image as a PDF file onto Google Drive. Let's go over the benefits of this entire workflow. Number one, it's a quick and efficient process. The whole process of acquiring the photos to importing it into Google Drive takes about less than a minute. Number two, patient is far more engaged because they've got the photos right in front of them so they can see what's going on. I'm able to zoom in on the photos and actually pinpoint problems and issues and risks of not moving forward with treatment. Number three, since the images are already saved on the cloud, we can access it, or anyone in the office can access it from anywhere, and even remotely to send it as attachments to pre-authorizations or claims. Number four, and most importantly, because this process is super simple and fast, we use this process on a daily basis with every patient when it comes to taking photos and presenting treatment. And because of that, it's become part of our workflow in our daily routine. All right, let's go over some of the tools and resources we use in our daily workflow when it comes to case presentation. I know I've already mentioned 2 softwares that we use, but let's go over it in details. I mentioned earlier that we invested into 3D printing about 3 years back. One of the things we purchased to get into the 3D printing game was a Medit 3D scanner. This was the best investment that I wish I had done earlier when I started my practice. It's completely replaced all of my conventional impressions. In fact, we scan all of our crown and bridge units with the 3D scanner. 90% of the time, we don't utilize any impression material. There are some cases when it comes to implants that I still do impressions, but otherwise the 3D scanner is what we use. But since we're talking about case acceptance here, it's been an amazing tool when it comes to presenting treatment to patients. Whenever I see a patient who may be a good candidate for clear aligners, I go ahead and scan them. I haven't even brought up the topic of aligning teeth to the patient yet. So while I'm scanning, if the patient's asked why we're doing the scan, I usually let them know that we scan all new patients so we have a record of their teeth and their bite. Let's go over the software. I mentioned briefly earlier that I use Microsoft OneNote. Now, Microsoft OneNote, I do not use it for editing images. It's just part of my workflow for photography, only so I can actually paste the images into OneNote so I can draw on them when I'm presenting treatment to the patient. I did not purchase Microsoft OneNote. It actually comes pre-installed with most PCs that you purchase today. Another software that I use on a daily basis is Google Suite. And part of Google Suite is Google Drive. In fact, we have a separate account for the office for Google Suite. And I have Google Drive installed as a separate application on the laptop. It basically creates like a virtual drive into which you can easily drag and drop files into, so the files are automatically uploaded to the cloud in the background. And as I mentioned earlier, in OneNote, once I'm done with the patient presenting treatment and patient's left the office, I'll go ahead and just right click on the tab, export. I'll save the file as a PDF and I'll drop it into the Google Drive folder, and I don't have to worry about separately sending it to Google Drive later on. It just happens in the background. I can then use these PDFs to search by patient's name, or also anyone in the office or someone remotely can access the Google Drive folder to actually send these documents as attachments to pre-authorizations or processing of claims, which I strongly recommend. All right, so some key takeaways. My point in showing you everything I've shown you in this video is to share with you what's worked in my office and what hasn't. But whatever's working for me now may still not necessarily work for you. But you need to tweak your systems over time and figure out what's working for you. You can invest in technology, but you need to invest enough time also to learning that technology and also implement systems so you and your team can utilize that technology in your office. You want to create a habit of using whatever it is that you invested into on a daily basis, because any piece of tech you purchase in the beginning, it's always frustrating due to the learning curve, but you've got to take a deep dive, and more you do it, faster you become at it. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you found this helpful and you're able to incorporate some, if not all, into your daily workflow so you can help your patients move forward with treatment. Take care.